Did you hear the shocking news? This week, South Korea's president shocked the world with a martial law order, plunging the country into hours of political chaos and fierce backlash before abruptly reversing the decree. The headlines of the week feel like a stark reminder of the fragile balance between democracy and division. For us, this news put even more focus on the themes we encountered during our visit to the DMZ, the Demilitarized Zone. It's a place where history, politics, and deeply human stories come together. A place that felt all too familiar for me, having grown up in East Germany. You see, I was raised in what people now call another society, where socialism shaped every corner of life. My family was deeply tied to the military. After reunification, my father left the military entirely, refusing to collaborate with those he once saw as his enemy. Life changed dramatically. My mom kept serving the country she lived in, not in uniform anymore, because at the time, women were not allowed to be on active duty, but she always made sure she could feed her kids. My parents divorced. A few years later, my mom married again, a man from West Germany. And so did I, many years later. Alpay was born and raised in West Germany, though his roots are Turkish. For our kids, this history is baffling. They struggle to imagine their granddads standing on opposite sides of a divided Germany, or how I grew up with Jagdwurst, like a hunting sausage instead of a real schnitzel. Coffee substitutes, hardly any bananas, no jeans, and certainly no car. It's a reality they can't picture, but one I see reflected in South Korea's divided nation. So join us this week as we take you to the DMZ, a journey through Korea's divided past that feels more relevant than ever in the face of today's political uncertainty. We began our day very early in Seoul, a vibrant city that blends tradition and modernity. The streets buzzed with energy, but beneath the surface, there's a tension you can feel. The news of martial law and its quick reversal adds another layer to South Korea's complex story. For us, a family with ties to Germany, a country once divided, the idea of a nation split in two feels deeply personal. It's why we chose to visit the DMZ, to better understand Korea's journey and share this experience with our children, who are too young to fully grasp the gravity of such division. So after a quick bite in the morning, we set out from Seoul, heading north to Imjingak Pyeonghwa-Nuro Park.
Is it right?
Ja, weil die kann hinten schon dieses Flugzeug gesehen.
Ah, mir auch.
Wolltest du zeigen oder nicht?
Go this way. This is the older side, and over here we have 3 spots. I will show you around the park for the 3 interesting spots.
The Bridge of Freedom was our first stop. It was installed to pay respect to the displaced people who died, yearning for their family and hometown in North Korea, and give their spirits consolation. It's where prisoners of war once crossed back into South Korea.
So after Korean War, when we started Korean War in 1953, main issue to North and South was how to exchange prisoners from North and South. So through this bridge, we had the South Korean prisoners. How many? 12,000 South Korean prisoners. So actually, after Korean War, North Korea sent 13,000 South Korean prisoners. So most of the South Korean prisoners walked through this bridge to come back to South Korea.
Standing there, we couldn't help but reflect on the countless families torn apart by Korea's division. Even though there are some souvenir stands now where you can buy North Korean coins and bills and other such things, let's not forget the families who, even today, live with the pain of separation.
So do you remember we already had two more bridges over the river before we had the Freedom Bridge to have the South Korean prisoners. So one on the left side was first restored to connect to the Freedom Bridge, and this one didn't restore because we like to keep to remember history, right? So here, as you see the photo, upper part of the bridge were all collapsed from bombing during the war, and only legs of the bridge were survived. So here we have only legs of the bridge on the right side. No way, right? This one already 9 or 10 kilometers to the border, right? So all those mountains you can see around the park is in the civil controlled area. So that's why those gondolas are going to North Korea? No, civil controlled area, right? So this is living from this park to the civil controlled area. So that is another one. They can enjoy the view around the park, and they can stop there, civil controlled area, and they can enjoy the view to this park too. So, okay, let's talk about these two girl statues over here in this park. So these statues are kind of the symbol of victims of sexual slavery by the Japanese Imperial Army during the World War II, right? So I think you heard a lot, comfort woman. Right? Have you heard about that? We don't say comfort woman anymore because it's not comfort. We just say sexual slavery, right? So this is not only an issue in Korea. This is an issue in China, in Asia, in Europe, as I believe, right? So the first witness was reported over here in South Korea, 1991. And since then, we have 240 victims. And among those, 9 victims are still alive over here in South Korea. And they're all over 85 years old woman over here in South Korea. And then 2011, South Korean artist made this statue. And then the statue here, first one, was organized in front of the Japanese embassy to ask for sincere apology from the Japanese government. So still we have a regular protest on every Wednesdays in front of the Japanese embassy. Okay, so normally one statue is enough. So since then we have 100 statues around over here in South Korea, right? So normally one statue is enough to tell the truth, right? But here in this park we have 2 statues. So that is the related to the relation between North Korea and South Korea, right? So 2 statues were organized over here 2019 after 2018 peaceful talk. So the former government was very good relation with North Korea, right? So that time 2019 2 statues were organized over here to send one of them to North Korea to share same history of Japanese occupation, right? So think about it, North Korea, South Korea actually was one from the foundation of Asian Korea, right? So here we lived together with North and South as one nation over 5,000 years. But after Korean War, we all separated. So we just separated only more than 70 years, right? So history, we are on the same page. Particularly Japanese occupation history, we are on the exact same page. So that is the reason the former government tried to send one of them to share same history. But 2020, what happened? Pandemic. So they had to stay over here, nowhere to go. And 2021, still pandemic. They had to stay here. And 2022, in June, we had a new president. The current president was elected, right? And he's from Conservative Party. So politically, here, traditionally, if we have a president from the Conservative Party, they are not interested in permanent relation between North and South. So that's why they are still over here in this park.
It's already very interesting. We learn a lot about history, a lot about nowadays politics as well. yeah, it's just the start. But yeah, I'm really interested to hear and see more about it. It's very, very interesting, especially to me. I don't know how you feel. Of course, the kids are a little bit bored, I guess, here and there, because it's all in English. So they don't understand all of it. They don't understand the historical context that well, of course, because they didn't learn any of it at school yet. It's the first contact with any of this kind of history, but for me it's very interesting coming from East Germany and having experienced the reunification of East and West Germany and seeing how life could have been, maybe for me, if it wasn't that way. So very interesting here for sure. Then our tour took us deeper into the DMZ, where history is almost tangible. We had soldiers, very young-looking men, come on our bus to check everyone's passport. And then we got off at the third tunnel. Have you heard of it? Do you have any idea what it could be? Our kids got reminded of our history class in Vietnam, where we crawled into some of the leftover Coogee tunnels, a legendary trace of the shocking happenings of what in the West is known as Vietnam War, locally referred to as American War. But the third tunnel at the DMZ luckily does not have such dramatic stories to tell, and hopefully never will be. It was discovered in 1978. Designed to infiltrate the South, they say. It could move 30,000 troops in under an hour. And here's just a short reminder, Seoul, with more than 9 million inhabitants, is only about 44 kilometers or 27 miles away. So we don't want to imagine what could have happened or could happen. They told us that there are more tunnels like that. By the way, we were not allowed to take a camera or phone with us when we walked into it. And some tunnels have probably not been found yet. We just visited the third infiltration tunnel here at the DMZ.
We're not allowed to film.
Well, we weren't allowed to film, so unfortunately we can't show you any footage of it, so you have to come yourself.
Okay, so here can you see the round building on top, gray one? That is observatories. On the third floor, we have an outdoor observatory deck. So on the third floor, photo, it's all okay around this outdoor observatory deck, right? But down over here, we have a photo regulation.
The Dora Observatory provided us with a rare, clear view into North Korea. A landscape so close, yet where life is probably very different. We didn't hear any propaganda speech from North Korea. We didn't see any trash balloons or marching soldiers on the other side. Just a few single people riding bikes. As we here look into North Korea, whether it be a propaganda village or not, we can't tell. But we have to mention a movie that we got shown at the third infiltration tunnel. It was far from an informative documentation. It was pure propaganda in its worst form. It was a story about they are evil and we are good, black or white, no gray zone in between. A picture of an enemy. A description of life, how we don't want our kids to see the world. We don't know what you think or believe, but we tell our kids regularly, you don't have to be friends with everybody, but you should be able to work with anybody. So we are curious what you think about what it means to live with such a division. Not everything was heavy that day. Our kids surprised us by thoroughly enjoying the tour. They didn't find it boring at all. Also thanks to our guides' engaging stories. Did you know that Pyongyang is known for cold noodles? We didn't. And even though we weren't the biggest fan of cold noodles when we tried them in Sokcho, who knows? Maybe they'd be delicious. We also got surprised to see and hear that the DMZ is a haven for animals rarely found in other parts of the Korean peninsula, including bears, cranes, deer, and otters. When we stopped for a local buffet lunch, we actually talked about what it must be like to go hiking in nature that has hardly been touched by humans for the past 70 years or so. So, welcome here at the Dora Observatory in South Korea. Yeah, we're still in South Korea, but actually very, very close to North Korea. Behind me, you can see quite a lot of binoculars and people looking through them to the North Korean side. You can see the flag, you can see some villages, and if you keep really still and look for a while, you actually see people working on the field and some vehicles driving forth and back. Not many actually. But yeah, there is some life over there for sure. And before actually coming here, we went to the third infiltration tunnel, visited this one. And compared to the Kuji tunnels in Vietnam, it's not really scary at all. At least that's what I thought. It's quite far for sure. It's quite steep at the beginning. Yeah, but it's just quite a big tunnel though. But it was interesting to visit for sure. And we also saw a movie before heading into the tunnel, equipped with helmets so that we don't bump our heads. But I have to really say the movie was just like 8 minutes long. And it was really, really bad. To be honest, my personal opinion, I don't know who did this movie, but it was propaganda pure. When you look some historical movies, I don't know, it might sound harsh, but if you look a video of Nazi regime propaganda, it sounded the same. I don't know who did this voiceover here, but it was really bad voiceover. Like real propaganda, which I don't like. I would have preferred to just get some facts. I know we're on the South Korean side, so of course we get the South Korean opinion, probably influenced by American views, I guess. This is normal, you know, but I didn't expect to have such a really dramatically biased opinion. So yeah, I guess you have to come and see it yourself to actually believe it. But really seeing the view here, not just the political side of it, but also the view, the nature, it's very beautiful here. And it's really such a shame, yeah, with all the political things happening here. It can be different. It could be different. It can be different. And hopefully it will be in the future as well, in a peaceful reunion someday, hopefully. In Seoul, we heard on the news that some North Korean soldiers supposedly crossed the inter-Korean border. Warning shots were fired. Now, weeks and months later, we hear about a martial law decree and of it being overturned. So the news reminds us that this is a nation still grappling with its future. On our road trip across South Korea, an elderly woman in Gwangju had told us how older generations fear the current tensions, while younger people seem almost numb to it all. Are they resigned or simply resilient? As we reflected on the DMZ experience, the news of South Korea's political tensions lingered in our minds. The parallels between the past and present are striking. The DMZ stands as a stark reminder of the cost of division, but also of the resilience of those who endure it. For our family, this journey wasn't just about history, it was about hope. Germany's reunification showed us what's possible. Can Korea's story someday have a similar ending? This week's topic feels more relevant than ever. How do you think South Korea's current tensions will shape its future? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this video resonates with you, give it a thumbs up, share it, and subscribe to our travel journal. And stay tuned for next Sunday's video as we continue our exploration of this diverse but beautiful world. Until then, remember, history is never just in the past. It's unfolding around us every day.